Today we begin a new sermon series. It's going to last 3 weeks through December 23rd, and it's titled Generosity Unleashed. And the goal of this series is to explore the idea that money is a tool. Money's not bad, money's not evil, money's not necessarily good. Money is a tool. And some people will say the Bible says that money's evil, and it's not true, right? The Bible says the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. And I'm convinced that generosity, what we're talking about in this series, is that generosity is the key to killing that root and to keep it from growing and leading to all kinds of evil in our lives. And so just I want you all just to take a deep breath with me. Last week we talked about giving to the church. I know that's a hard topic for some of you, and you don't really like to hear about that. And so we talked about it last week. And if you weren't here, you should go back and listen to that. But this series is not a series about how to get you to give more money to the church. This series is a series about you using the money that God has given you as a tool for God's glory. And so we're going to be looking at it in a holistic way. And we're going to be in the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is a great book. I've been told that as you get older, Ecclesiastes may become one of your favorite books in the Bible as you start to experience challenges in life. And so in Ecclesiastes, we're looking at a book written by King Solomon. And Solomon was a man that God said, "Hey, Solomon, whatever you want, I'll grant you one wish." Kind of like a genie. I'll grant you one wish, but it wasn't the genie, it was God. So it actually happened. He said, I'll give you one thing, and Solomon asked for wisdom. And God says, because you didn't ask for riches or honor or for the death of your enemies, I'm going to give you all of these things in addition to the wisdom. And we find in in the book of 1 Kings, that Solomon had a lot of riches. I read that he had 12,000 horses. He had a gold steps and a gold throne that he sat on, and he drank out of gold cups. Like, Solomon would have made a really good rap music video. Drinking out of gold cups. I mean, he had everything. But Ecclesiastes tells us what he learned through this experience. Ecclesiastes is about life under the sun, which is simply life in this world. And so what we're going to see is that he finds that it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. He pursued different things throughout the book he talks about. And so I believe that Solomon wrote the book of Proverbs. He wrote that throughout his life. And so he gathered these proverbs. Some of them maybe were even given to him from other people, and he recorded them because he said these are really good proverbs. And then the book of Song of Solomon, or Song of Songs, is written when he was a young man and in love and all these, and feeling those feelings. And so that's written then, but then Ecclesiastes is written as an old man before he dies, about the lessons that he learned throughout life. And I'm glad that he wrote it, because I'm a person that would rather learn things from people that have experienced them than have to experience them myself. And so maybe you're with me. Maybe you say, well, I wish I could, but it doesn't seem to be working for me. But maybe today God will give you some favor, and you won't have to go through the hardship, and he will just let you learn from someone else. So we're going to be in Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 10 to 20, and we're going to quickly look at 4 things about money, and then we're going to look at the main point, and then I'm going to give you a lot of application to close the message today. And so the first thing we see is in verse 10. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 10 says this: "He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity. This also is meaningless." Let me say it plainly. If you love money, you will not be satisfied with money. Solomon is telling us this. But if we're honest, this is really hard for us to believe. You mean to tell me that if I come into $1 million tomorrow, I'm not going to be satisfied? Solomon says, if you love money, that won't satisfy you. He's not saying that you can't be satisfied or content, but if you love money, you will not be satisfied. You say, well, if I get that promotion this year and I get a $25,000 raise, then I'll be satisfied. Solomon would be someone that could speak from experience and say, I've had every promotion I've had everything that I could ever want. I had promotion upon promotion. I was the king of Israel and had everything that money could buy. And yet, it did not satisfy me. He had a void in his life, and this void couldn't be filled with money. And you ask a person who's rich, you say, well, it seems like you got a lot of money, but you're not satisfied. Well, how much money do you need to be satisfied? And they'll say, well, just a little bit more. And so if you press them and you say, well, okay, you're making $250,000 now, and so will you be happy when you make $300,000? Well, maybe for like a day, but then I'm going to want 350, then I'm going to want 400, then I'm going to want 500. And so it's not, if that's what you're after. See, I think the love of money is defined as this. It's the relentless pursuit of more. And so if that's what you're after, it's an addiction and something that cannot be filled. We see in the verse we just looked at. It says it's meaningless. It's vanity. In chapter 1, he says that it's like chasing after the wind. You ever seen someone chase after the wind? People don't do that because it looks stupid. He's saying to try to find satisfaction in your money is stupid. Because if you do that, you're never going to find it. You may find more money, but you won't find what you're looking for. In Proverbs chapter 30, verse 7 to 9, we read this from Solomon. 2 things I ask of you. Deny them not to me before I die. Remove far from me falsehood and lying. In other words, help me to be a more godly man. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food that is needful for me, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God. Solomon is asking God, Solomon is a rich man asking God that he would not be rich. There's stories, I could tell you examples of people that are rich today that said, I was happier when I was, and they would name some position they were that's way lower than they were, 10 steps down. Said, I was much happier then. He says that there's 2 temptations here. One is you don't have enough, and so you're tempted to steal, you're tempted to do evil things to get money, but if you have too much, the temptation is to say, well, I don't need you, God. God, who's God? There's no God, I did this myself. There's 2 different temptations. He said, I would rather not have to deal with those temptations. I'd rather just have just enough. But God did not grant Solomon his request. And so we continue reading in Ecclesiastes chapter 5 in verse 11. It says this, when goods increase, they increase who eat them. And what advantage has their owner but to see them with his own eyes or with his eyes? And so let's just bring this to something that you might be able to relate to, or at least be able to imagine. What if you won the lottery? You win the lottery tomorrow, or whatever. It draws on Friday and Saturday, I believe, so or Tuesday. I don't know. I used to work at a grocery store, so I used to know that. You win the lottery, and it's a lot of money. You know what's going to happen? People are going to start asking you for money, right? That long-lost relative that may not really be a relative will start to say, hey, I'm like your 15th cousin. You got to keep family first, right? Or you'll start getting a letter written, hey, Mr. So-and-so, you got a lot of money. Here's my organization. Would you please support this? Or maybe you're driving a really nice car. And so when you pull up to a stoplight, or when you pull up into a shopping center and somebody comes up, not dressed very nice, a little gruff looking, and they say, sir, would you please buy me a meal? And maybe this will sound weird to you. I don't think that that's a bad thing. I don't think that it's a bad thing that if you have a lot of money that people ask you for money. Because who do you want the homeless person to ask? The other homeless person? Like, not to be like weird or rude, but like, do you want the homeless person to ask the other homeless person to buy them food? Or do you want them to ask someone that they see that has way more than they need for it? And so here's something that maybe this will start to change our thinking about generosity. For those of us that God has given us way more than we need, I think he also gives us more opportunities to help others. And so when God gives us those opportunities, the challenge is if we love money, we won't see them as opportunities at all. We'll see them as inconveniences. We'll see them as problems. So the second thing for today is this. If you love money, you'll view opportunities as problems. Instead of saying, God, is this someone you want me to help? Here's what you're going to do, because I've done it. You're going to ask yourself, you never say this out loud, how can I say no without looking like a jerk? Right? Surely there are people in here that have asked that question. I'm not the only one. But if God has given you an abundance, more than you need, and I'm not talking about $250,000 salary, $1 million like signing bonus because you play for a professional sporting team. No. If God has given you more, which most of us he has, more than you need, he's going to also provide you opportunities to be generous. Let's look at verse 12. It says, sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. Literally, what it's saying is that a rich person eats too much. And it's because they eat too much, they can't sleep. Most scholars don't believe that that's the point of what he's saying here. But that's literally what he's saying. But most scholars would say that what Solomon is saying is that if you have a lot of money, you can't sleep at night because you're worried about a lot of money. So that's the third thing. If you love money, you stay up worrying about losing it. Instead of, you're like, well, if I get this much money, I won't be stressed. That's not true. If you have more money, you're going to have more stress because it's more to manage. If money is everything to you, if the pursuit of money is what matters most to you, you will stay up at night and lose sleep over it. And you're going to start spending money so that you can sleep at night. And some of you would find that you would spend money to sleep at night and it still doesn't let you sleep at night. Solomon apparently experienced this. The fourth thing I want you to see is in verses 13 to 17. It says, there is a grievous evil that I have seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owner to his hurt, and those riches were lost in a bad venture, and he is father of a son, but he has nothing in his hand. As he came from his mother's womb, he shall go again, naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil that he may carry away in his hand. This is also a grievous evil. Just as he came, so shall he go. And what gain is there to him who toils for the wind? Moreover, all his days he eats in darkness and in much vexation and sickness and anger. No, thank you. I'm not signing up for that. I am not signing up for what he just talked about. But the main thing, the fourth thing is this. Even if you make it to old age without losing it, you still can't take it with you. I would say almost every pastor in America has said this: you never see a hearse towing a U-Haul. And I would add to that, even if you did, it would make no difference because you can't take it with you. I heard a story this week about a man who he had a small fortune. And so he called 3 of his friends over. This is a man that loved money. And he called 3 of his friends over and said, hey, I'm going to give each of you $100,000 because I'm probably going to die in the next year. I'm going to give you $100,000, and here's what I need you to do. You're my friends, right? I need you to keep this $100,000, and when I die, when you come to my funeral, I need you to stick it in my coffin so I can take it with me. And so, fast forward, the man dies. And one by one, these 3 friends go into the funeral, and they place the money in the coffin. They come out, they have a meeting, and they say, hey, so you did what he said, right? And the first guy says, well, I heard about this orphanage, and they seemed like they needed some money, and so I gave them $20,000, and I thought he would maybe be pleased with that. So I gave him $20,000, and so there's $80,000 left. So I put $80,000 in the coffin, and the second friend said, that's really interesting. I did something very similar. There was an organization that needed it, so I gave them $40,000. And so I put $60,000 in the coffin, and the last friend was like, how could you guys do this? You promised that you would put all $100,000 in the coffin, and yet your bleeding hearts led you to give it to some people. He said, that was just wrong. And he said, well, so you just put all $100,000 in there? And he said, yep, I wrote him a check. So that's a really smart guy, right? I'll wait 90 days and see if you cash it. If you cash it, you can have it. It's a funny story, but it helps us understand. We can't take it with us. But here's what I think in the church we have kind of missed. We can't take our money with us, but the Bible teaches that we can send it ahead. Do you know that? You can't take it with you, but you can send it ahead. I'm not saying you can go to like Western Union and wire your money to heaven. That's not what I'm talking about. It's a kind of interesting process. It's found in Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 to 21. I talked about one of these verses last week, but it says this: do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. So we experienced that. You got an old car, it's going to rust. You leave your house open and people know there's things in there. You live in Colombia, it's going to get stolen. Verse 20, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Send it ahead, where neither moth nor rust destroys, no rust in heaven, and where thieves do not break in and steal. You can leave all your possessions in heaven out in your house with the door unlocked, and nobody's going to steal it. It says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I quoted that verse last week. But this verse is teaching that you can send your treasures ahead, not through a wire transfer. But one of the ways you can do this is through gospel-centered generosity, using your money as God would have you to use it. So, for example, you saw in your bulletin there's an offering called the Lottie Moon Christmas offering. It goes to the International Mission Board. And if you give some of your treasures to that will lay up treasures for you in heaven. That allows for missionaries to go into the world and reach unreached people groups. Or if, for example, you give to gospel-centered work, like through the local church, or you give to church planting, or you give to crew at the college level, and you give to these ministries that are helping people come to know Jesus Christ. Gospel-centered generosity. You are laying up treasures for yourself in heaven. There are other ways to do this, but that is one of the ways that your money can be transferred to heaven. Do I know what it means to lay up treasures in heaven? Do I know? Like, if I'm honest, do I know what that means? No. I have no idea what that's going to look like. But it sounds pretty good. It sounds better than me thinking I'm going to put it in my coffin and take it with me. That's just foolish. But the Bible says that we can lay up treasures in heaven. And so I think all of us should do that. We're commanded in this text by Jesus, our Savior, to do this. And so we should do it. You know, at my seminary graduation rehearsal on Thursday, the president of the seminary, he came and he said, I want to challenge you with something. And he spent a significant amount of time talking about this. I want to challenge you with your retirement planning. Because a lot of you guys are in your 20s, some of you are in your 30s. He said, I'm an old man. But I got good advice 40 years ago when I entered the ministry, and I put away money every time I got paid so that I would be prepared for retirement, so that I could hand off the baton to the younger generation. He said, but I want you to know something. My retirement plan is this. I have money, it's been going away, and eventually there's going to be a small fortune. And my plan is to live off the interest of that small fortune. And so when I die, that small fortune will still be there. And so what my wife and I have decided is that when I die, not when she dies, but when I die, 25% of my fortune is going to this seminary. You say, why in the world would you do that? This guy has 3 kids, right? 3 kids, they're all pastors. Why would you give some of your fortune to a seminary? And He said, well, why wouldn't I? So have you read your Bible about leaving small fortunes to your children and what kind of things that can mess them up and all those things? So he's going to leave some of it to his wife and to them, but he said, I've made that decision now. And here's what stood out to me when he said that. What a way to guide your heart. It's as if when he went and he filled out that will and turned it in, it's like he said, heart, this is what you will treasure. You want to treasure all this stuff? No. You're going to treasure the work of the Lord. I am telling you to do that. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. He said, this is where it's going. And it's not even happening yet. It's happening upon his death, but he's leading his heart through his last few years of ministry to treasure what is important. Maybe you're in a situation like that. I am planning to be in a situation like that when I retire, that I will be able to live off the interest of my retirement account. And so I have to ask myself, how do I want to guide my heart as I approach that? One last thing I want you to see in this text, in verse 18 to 20, it says this, behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun the few days of his life that God has given him, for this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, this is the gift of God. For he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. In verse 19, he has this very interesting concept here. He talks about the power to enjoy your wealth. The power to enjoy what God has given you. So what that implies, some people think, well, if I have the money, then I can enjoy it. It's not true. You can spend it, but he's talking about something different. He's talking about having the ability to enjoy it. And he says this is a God-given thing, that God will give you the ability to enjoy your wealth. He says in order to do that, we must accept our lot. We must understand this is what God has provided for us. Solomon didn't want to be so rich. We saw that in Proverbs chapter 30. Solomon would rather not be so rich, but because he was so rich, he had to learn to accept his lot and use his lot, which is what God has given him, as God would want him to use it, as a steward. There's a story of a man, I would argue that he's the richest man since Solomon, John D. Rockefeller. Some of you know who this is, but this man in the late 1800s got into, or in the mid to late 1800s, it was the peak of his earning time. He got into the oil business. And so by age 33, he made his first $1 million. It's pretty good. In the 1800s. By 43, he had the world's largest business. But by 53, this man had $1 billion in the 1800s. He couldn't hardly eat anything. They said he only ate milk and crackers. All of his hair was falling out. And so they said some of the newspapers at the time were writing his obituary because it looked like he was going to die. And he accepted that lot. He accepted that he was going to die. Didn't see any way out of it. So he said, I'm going to die, so I can't take it with me, so let me start giving it away. And so Rockefeller started giving millions of dollars to missions and to universities and to hospitals, set up foundations and started doing all these things. And he started being able to eat. He started being able to sleep. And his hair started coming back in. And you say, well, that's strange. Sounds like a miracle. It's not a miracle. He just stopped worrying about his money and what he's going to do with it. He started using it as God designed for him to use it. Rockefeller was supposed to die around age 53. He lived to be 98. He stopped working a couple years after this happened, and he said, I'm just going to spend the rest of my life figuring out how to give the rest of this money away. And so you'll find there's many things that are here today, good works that are a result of this man's generosity. God blessed Mr. Rockefeller with a lot of money. But when he blessed him with a lot of money, he also blessed him with You may say it doesn't feel like a blessing, it feels like a curse, but with the responsibility of doing something with all of his wealth. You know, I thought I was think about this. I said, well, what if Rockefeller was a Christian, by the way, the whole time, even when his hair was falling out, he was tithing, right? He believed in tithing 10%. So Rockefeller was giving 10% the whole time. So whatever church he was a part of, they were getting a lot of money from him, but it didn't make a dent in his health. So what if Mr. Rockefeller came to me, sick or not, and said, hey, I got a lot of money, and I don't know what to do with it. You know what I'd say to him? Hey, as your pastor, God has blessed you immensely. And so the question you need to ask is, why? Why has God given you $1 billion? Is it so that you can worry about it all the time? Or is it because he's blessed you so that you can be a blessing to others? And ask him that. Leave him with that. I don't have to answer the question. Why do you think God has allowed you to make all this money? And so when we start to bring God into these conversations, our actions begin to change. Because, well, I got all this money, it's mine, right? I'm going to buy a yacht, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to buy that, I'm going to buy property, all that stuff. Maybe you do that anyways. But if you bring God into the conversation, maybe what you do changes. So the main point of what I want you to see here, and the main point of what I want to leave you with is this. In order to enjoy money, we must learn to be good stewards. The goal of this message today is that I don't want you to be someone that God gives a lot to, which he's given a lot of us a lot to, at least in comparison to the world, and not be able to enjoy it. I think that's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for God to give someone, to bless them immensely financially even, and to not be able to enjoy it because you're always worried about it. It glorifies God when we enjoy what he has provided. But we must learn not to see money as an idol, something that we serve and something that we do everything to get, but we must learn to see it as a tool. It's morally neutral. And so no matter how much money God has given you, I would say, in order to be a good steward of it, you need to have a plan for it. Whether you have $15,000 a year income, you're working at Walmart and just part-time, or whether you're making $250,000 a year, or whether you're making more than that, you need to have a plan for it. And a plan for money is called a budget, right? You've heard of these before? Plan for money is called a budget. And so here's a question. You might not like me for asking it. How many of you, and don't raise your hands because I don't want to embarrass you, how many of you have a plan for Christmas presents? Like you have a budget for Christmas presents? And you're not answering, you're answering in your heads, right? So I see some yeses and nos in your heads. Like I don't really see that. But here's the thing. Most people don't plan for Christmas presents. They don't plan for presents at all. They just say, oh, this would be nice for them. This would be nice for them. They just buy it. Right? In the day of Amazon, you can have a box at your house 7 times a day. Come in. You don't even have to know. You get a bill in January. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm in debt. And so listen, it is foolish. It is foolish to go into debt to buy people presents. It's foolish. But the majority of Americans go into debt to buy Christmas presents. They're like, oh, I just want to be generous. I want to be nice. Listen. The Bible doesn't advocate for you to be generous to go into debt, right? Oh, I want to give my kids this. No. If you can't afford it, you can't afford it. You want to buy your kids an extravagant gift, you need to plan for it. This is what it means to be a steward at a very simple thing. We have things other than Christmas. Christmas is just in December, right? But we have other bills and things that we have to deal with. And the good news is, I thought about saying this or not, the good news is that you have 30 days to return everything you already bought. But anyways, the question I want to ask you about your budget is, what difference does the gospel make in your budget? Because the question we ask ourselves is this: is it true that if you're rich and you're not a believer and you're generous, you will feel better about being rich? Of course it's true. This sermon could be preached to people that aren't Christians, but the question we have to ask ourselves is this: what difference does the gospel make in your budget? And here's the difference it should make. It should change your values. Where a non-believer would say, well, the ASPCA just tugs on my heart, and I'm going to give them $10,000 this year. Hey, maybe you choose to do that as a Christian, but we have to have gospel-centered values. And the Bible tells me that humans are more valuable than animals. And it also tells me that someone's soul is more important than their temporal needs. And so when I think about my budget, I want to have gospel-centered generosity. And you may have this argument that I want to address really quick. You may say, well, if God gives me more money, I'll be more generous. You may be one of those special people, but statistically speaking, that's not true. Most people that have more money give less as a percentage. I'm talking about the church, I'm talking about in general. Just their overall giving is less. They may give more dollars, but they give less of a percentage. And unless you're giving more of a percentage, you're not really making a dent in the love of money that tends to try to grow up in our hearts. So don't believe that lie. But I want you just to dream with me for a minute. What if we all, I'll use the word covenanted, but I'll use that lightly. What if we all agreed to, instead of putting a cap on our generosity, a cap on our giving, we put a cap on our living. And we said, hey, this year I lived on $60,000. And let's say God gives you a $30,000 raise next year. You lived just fine on $60,000, didn't you? Well, now you have a question. God, you just given me $30,000. What do you want me to do with it? These are the questions that stewards ask. I have a dream that I've shared with some of you in our church. So we have opened our own benevolence fund. What we used to have was a benevolence fund that's shared between Bethany and Columbia and Bethany and Ellicott City, but now that we've moved autonomous, we have a benevolence fund with $0 in it. So it's open. Well, there's 25, minimum balance, $25. It's open. Benevolence, so this is just a weird word. When I started going to Bethany many years ago, I was like, what does that mean? It doesn't make any sense, right? Just call it helping people fund or something. But benevolence is a good word. What that fund does is it helps meet people's needs. Someone would call the church, maybe it's one of you, you lose your job, and you'd call the church and you'd say, hey, I can't pay my electric bill. Or hey, my car payment, I can't pay my car payment. And you'd say, I lost my job, I got a new job starting in 3 weeks. Really easy for us to help you because we know that it's not going to be a need that you have every month. But then also people outside the church, hey, they'll call and say, I needed some money to help feed my kids. Or my lights are getting turned off, or I can't pay my mortgage, or I can't pay my rent. I'm about to lose my place, and so they would call us. And so what we do is we send them to a benevolence fund manager that we have at the church, and that person sits down with them, calls them, does something depending on how much they need, and they figure out how to help this person. Not just what we can help them immediately with, which we usually can, but they also figure out how can we really help this person? Are there resources in the community, in the government that we can connect them to so that they can be helped on a bigger scale? But what excites me more than all those things, I'm all for meeting temporal needs, but what excites me more than all of that is that the benevolence fund manager will have an opportunity, especially if they're outside of the church, to share the gospel with them. Hey, we're giving you this because God has given us the greatest gift that the world could ever ask for. And so here's my dream. My dream is that our benevolence fund would begin to have an average balance of $100,000. You say, well, that's a lot of money. It is. That's why it's called a dream. I don't need a dream to have it $100. I can just put $100 in there. That's my dream. And that our community would be a better place because Bethany Church is here and Bethany Church is able not just to give people handouts, but to see people's lives change. Because if someone has an issue, maybe their issue is that they don't know how to manage their money and that's the reason why they're in need. Well, listen, if they repent and believe the gospel, God gives them a new heart. If we can get them into Financial Peace University, God can transform them. Their whole family can be changed through our work. And so that's a dream that I have, and I believe that it's something that's not out of reach. And so we're going to talk about some next steps that will help all of us be more generous in different ways. And so let me share you the first one. Next step A, use an app like Mint to see where your money goes. You're like, what's Mint? Breath Mint? No. Mint is an app. It's owned by Intuit. Old school way is you use a piece of paper and pen, or you use Excel. I don't have time for that. You might, and if you do, God bless you. Mint is an app where you put in, you create an account. It's free. They're going to advertise to you. That's why it's free. But you go on this app, you download, you put in all your bank information. It's secure. It's owned by Intuit. You can do your research, make sure you're comfortable. And what it's going to do is going to track your spending. And so last week I asked you to fill out a giving worksheet, and I assumed something that I probably shouldn't have assumed. I assumed that you actually know where your money's going. But most people in America don't know where their money's going. They just buy stuff because they have money. So they just buy it, and at the end of the month, they pay the credit card bill, they pay what they can pay, and let the rest carry over. But Katie and I did this, and we realized there's some categories that maybe aren't even budgeted that you're spending money on a regular basis. And so what Mint will do is you make a charge on your credit card, debit card, or you can enter it manually, write a check. It's going to show up. And you have to categorize it, right? So it confronts you with reality. It helps you to actually track what you're spending to the nearest penny, right? And you go in there and you do it, and you talk with your spouse about it. You have a spouse, and you say, hey, CJ, your hunting budget is this much. You spent way more than that. So anyways, I'm anticipating that one. But it's important that you know where your money goes, because if you know where your money goes, then you can start to tell it where to go and be aware. And so the next thing I want you to do is make a monthly budget for 2019, right? So 2019 is a year, but a monthly budget. And so Mint will allow you to do that. If you can make your budget in Mint, there's other ways to do this. I'm not getting paid by Mint. I just think it's really helpful. And so if you make your monthly budget, you start to tell your money where to go. You're like, we spent $170 at Starbucks this month as a family. That is too much money. You're only allowed to get 1 cup of Starbucks a week. Pick your day wisely, right? And so you can make adjustments like that. If you need help making a budget, Mint obviously can help you. There's others in the church. Maybe somebody in your life group is really good at making a budget, and they'll sit down and talk to you. If you don't, and I'm in a life group, I encourage you to get in one in January where we kick them off. If you need to do this sooner, I would be happy to sit down with you. You may be like, I don't want you to know. Well, then I can't help you. But if you want my help, I'm happy to sit down and do this with you. Next step C, give up something to create a budget for generosity. Give up something to create a budget for generosity. Most of us spend money on things like Starbucks that we could forego if we needed to. And so what I'm going to challenge you to do, most of us aren't Rockefeller. Right? None of us are Rockefeller. If you were Rockefeller, I'd know it. You couldn't hide it that good. So most of us aren't saying, I have all this money that's not being spent, and now I need to figure out a way to put it. But I do believe that even though we aren't what we may call rich, even though we are in comparison to the world, that we can act like we're rich. We can act like we're rich and be generous if we start to forego things. And we say, well, I'm going to give up this much Starbucks, or I'm going to give up this, I'm going to give up that. Some people that have plenty of money give up cable, and they use the money that they would spend on cable to be generous. You say, well, but I can afford it. Yeah, of course you can afford it. I can afford to drink Starbucks every day too, but I choose not to because there's some things that excite me more than drinking a cup of coffee from Starbucks, right? Buy a Keurig, get some Starbucks coffee. Go get the Starbucks pump, get the Starbucks creamer, get the Starbucks cups. It'll still save you money, right, if you need it. But there's some things that excite me and Katie more. So on our way back from North Carolina on Friday, we sat down and we talked about, hey, God, what do you want us to do? So we spent hours talking about this. And so one of the things we're excited about for 2019 is something called a generosity fund. And so we've designated an amount of money each month that's going to go into a generosity fund, which is we're going to withdraw it as cash, and then we're just going to have it with us. And so during the month, we're going to be looking for people that we could bless that aren't expecting it. And so, for example, we go to a restaurant and we get lunch and the bill is $30. Well, maybe we leave a $50 tip on a $30 bill because we see that there's a waitress in a significant need and we want to know what God might want to do in their life through surprising her with a big tip. You say, well, she would say, well, why'd you do that? And then I could say, hey, God's been good to us. And the greatest good that he's done for us is send his son, Jesus Christ, to die for us. I've heard of pastors that have, there's more than one pastor that I know that does this, and people in this church have done it because he's done it. But I know of a specific pastor that baptizes waitresses all the time because he's chosen to do this. It's great, right? Hey, I was at this restaurant on Wednesday, and she's here today to be baptized, right? Great. I'm excited for that. Other thing is benevolence. I said I have this big goal for benevolence. It would be really hypocritical for me to say I have a big goal for benevolence and not say I'm going to give to that. And so we have designated an amount of money, more than the $5 a month that we ask everybody to give, to go to benevolence so that fund can be built up. And here's why I think it's important. We could just put all the money in our own generosity fund, right? And then when somebody says, we want you to help us with our electric bill, and I say, here's the money. It's not a really good process, right? Generosity fund, surprising people that are in need. They didn't ask for it. Benevolence, people ask for it. Two differences. Someone comes and says, hey, I need help with my electric bill, or I need help, can you give me this or that? And it's more than like $5, like it's like a lot of money, like I need a $100 bill paid. I say, hey, great news, we have a benevolence fund at our church. You can sit down with our benevolence fund manager, and they will make a determination whether they can help you. And the reason I like this is because it does things that I, as an individual, probably shouldn't be doing. The benevolence fund manager can ask someone, hey, I need to see your budget. I'm not going to do that. Like, that's just weird. Hey, can I see your budget? No. Benevolence fund has rules. They're like, they can just say, hey, these are the rules. If you want us to help you, these are the rules. And so they can actually help people instead of just giving handouts. So I would encourage you to consider setting an amount of your budget to go to benevolence. And then when people have needs, to give to that. And maybe you're one of those people that helps people all the time. I would encourage you, if you're willing to give someone $150 for their BG&E bill, say this, hey, I give money to benevolence, and maybe you write a check for $150 to benevolence, have them meet with the benevolence fund manager, and then let them make the determination, because they're probably going to make a better determination than you would be able to on your own, because they're going to be able to ask for information that it's really hard for you to ask for on your own. And I want to make sure you're clear. I am not encouraging anyone to go into debt to be generous. That's foolish. I'm encouraging you to make a budget to be generous, and most of us have to forego things in order to do that. Could I spend every cent that comes to me? Oh, absolutely. I could spend my salary times 4. No question. Lots of things I like. But there's things that are more important than what I like and what make me comfortable. Last thing, commit to being a steward that pursues Jesus. And so here's my challenge. You're going to make this budget. Hopefully you take this step. You're going to make a budget, and you're going to have a great plan for your regular income. There's people in here right now that are going to get an inheritance check this year. There are people in this room right now that are going to unexpectedly get a raise or a big bonus. You know what Hebrews 13:5 says? It says, keep your life free from the love of money. It doesn't say start the year free from the love of money, or start your life free from the love of money. It says keep your life free from the love of money. It implies that it's something that we have to continually manage. So if you come across a lot of money this year, you ask yourself this: God, what do you want me to do with this? And it may be that he wants you to put it in an investment account. I'm not saying it means you're giving it away. I'm saying you ask the question, and you let God tell you what to do with it. Say, well, I don't have a plan for it. Make a plan. Make a plan. You can make a plan before you spend it. But, church, I'm excited to see what God might do through us in 2019 as a church, not just with our finances, but just with us as a whole. And so I hope that you would take the time and take these next steps. I recognize that these next steps are going to take you longer than it took you to listen to my sermon, right? These next steps are going to take some time. But maybe you have a couple days off for Christmas, or maybe you just are going to do this today. But I would encourage you to do it. It's a good thing. I want you to enjoy what God has given you. But I know that you can't enjoy what God has given you if all you care about is getting more of what God has given you. And so I want you to make a plan. And I want you to pursue Jesus. We're going to end with a song titled Simple Pursuit. I'm going to invite the worship team to come up as I just just kind of transition to that. Instead of relentlessly pursuing money, church, we need to relentlessly pursue Jesus. And so we've been talking about money, and I've been talking, you may say, well, it seems like you've been talking to people that have more than enough, and you say, well, I can't even pay my bills. I recognize that. I recognize that there's people in this room that have really had a struggle to make ends meet this year. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you're in that place right now. And so what I want you to do is I want you to let me or let someone else around you, let them pray for you. Prayer is not a promise that God is going to just give you a bunch of money. But I want to pray for you because I know this is difficult. And maybe there are some things that we could help you with and get you on the right path. But what I want you to do is take this time as all of us sing this song, Simple Pursuit, just to say, be honest. Hey, this year's been really hard. You know, there's been times when I don't know if I could pay my bills. I didn't reach out to benevolence, but it's just been really hard. And so I want you to know that I'm here. You can come up and pray with me about other things, but I want you to know I'm here. If we get a long line, which we may, there could be deacons that come up here and pray with you as well. But I want you to know that God cares about your situation. And we want to go to him on your behalf and ask him for comfort, ask him for peace. So I'm going to ask you to stand.